Okay, I want to try a little experiment to kick things off. Just for a second, I want you to imagine a sound. Unless you're driving, maybe close your eyes. It's that sharp, rising electronic swing, or maybe it's that frantic melody that speeds up when the blocks are stacking too high. You can hear it, can't you?
Oh, instantly, yeah. If you were born anytime after, 1980, those sounds are basically hardwired into your brain. It's almost Pavlovian.
Totally. And usually when we hear those sounds, the bleeps and bloops of the Nintendo era, our brain just files it under one label.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia, exactly. It's the sound of sitting on the carpet, blowing into a cartridge, drinking a juice box. It's looking backward.
Which is fair. I mean, it is that.
Yeah.
But if you stop at nostalgia, you are missing such a huge part of the story.
And that is exactly where we're going today. We're looking at this fantastic column by MMR. It's called The Present and Future of Chiptune 8-Bit Music. And the author makes this claim that, frankly, I hadn't really considered before.
It's a bold take.
It is. The argument is that chiptune isn't a retro genre at all. It's a thriving, modern musical language that's actively shaping the future of electronic music.
And when you dig into the engineering, which is what we're about to do, it just makes perfect sense. This isn't about looking back. It's about what the source calls an aesthetic of limitation.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to look past that retro label. We're going to pop the hood on the old Nintendo Entertainment System on the Game Boy and really look at the silicon chips that made these sounds. And we're going to figure out why they're still so powerful in, 2026.
Well, it all comes down to this one concept the author mentions: universal musicality born from constraints.
I love that phrase. It sounds so philosophical, but it's actually really, really practical. Let's unpack that.
Okay, so think about your own experience. If you open up a laptop right now to make a song, say in Ableton or Logic, what are your limitations?
None. Zero. I have infinite tracks. I can download a plugin that sounds like the London Symphony Orchestra or, I don't know, a synth from Mars. Every sound in history is right there.
Exactly. And that is actually a problem. It's the paradox of choice. When you can do anything, it can be really hard to do something. You spend 3 hours trying to find the perfect snare drum instead of actually writing a melody.
Oh, that is painfully relatable. I get plugin fatigue just staring at the menu.
But in the 8-bit era, the composers didn't have that problem because they just didn't have those options. They were locked in this tiny, tiny box. The hardware, specifically the NES, gave them a maximum of 5 channels, 5 sounds at once. That's it.
So you couldn't just hide behind texture. You couldn't layer 50 violins to make something feel emotional.
You couldn't hide it all. If your melody wasn't good, the song was bad, period.
Yeah.
The source argues that because the hardware backed them into this corner, they had to write melodies that were abnormally memorable.
Which is why you can hum the Super Mario theme after hearing, 3 notes?
Yes. That's what the article calls high-purity melody.
Digital purity. It's an interesting phrase. It implies there's no, mud in the sound.
And there isn't. The waveforms themselves are mathematically simple. They have these really organized overtones, a simple image for your brain to process. And that's why this stuff works so well today. Because that sound is so pure, it cuts through a modern mix like a laser. You hear it in hyperpop, in EDM, in techno. It's not just a cute reference to Mario. It's acoustically efficient.
The earworm factor. The efficiency makes it stick. Okay, but to really get this, we need to meet the band. We need to understand the orchestra these composers were working with.
Right, let's get technical. We're going back to the Famicom, or as we know it here, the NES.
The Nintendo Entertainment System. And the conductor in this orchestra was a single chip, the Ricoh 2A03.
The Ricoh 2A03, it's a legend. And this chip gave composers exactly 5 channels to work with, 5 chairs on the stage.
Okay, let's walk through them, because each one had its own personality, right? The first 2 are the pulse or square waves.
These are the workhorses, the melody makers. If you're humming a Nintendo tune in your head right now, you are almost certainly humming a pulse wave. If you looked at it on an oscilloscope, it literally looks like a square.
But they weren't just static beeps. The article talks a lot about duty cycles.
And this is where the real artistry comes in. So the chiplet composers changed the duty cycle, which is basically just the ratio of how long the wave is on versus off. They had 4 settings: 12.5%, 25%, 50%, and 75%.
Okay, that sounds like engineering jargon. What am I actually hearing when they switch that percentage?
It's the difference between, say, a trumpet and a clarinet. A 12.5% duty cycle sounds really sharp then, almost nasal, it cuts. But if you switch over to 50% or 75%, the sound gets wider. It's fatter, warmer, almost hollow.
Oh, so it's like changing the pickup on an electric guitar. from the bridge to the neck.
That is a perfect analogy. The note's the same, but the whole voice of it changes. The source says the singing heart of chiptune lives right there in those pulse waves. You can make the NES sing with different emotions just by toggling those numbers.
That's amazing. Okay, so that's 2 channels for melody. Then we have channel 3, the triangle wave.
The triangle wave is your bassist. It's a much smoother sound than the square waves, not as buzzy. It's rounder. And on the NES, it was almost always used for the bass line. But it came with this huge, frustrating constraint.
It was
no volume control.
Really? The bass was just on or off?
Pretty much. The triangle channel couldn't change volume dynamically like the pulse channels could. It was just fixed. So imagine trying to mix a band where the bass player just refuses to turn down and plays at full blast the entire time.
That sounds like a nightmare for a producer. So how did they create any sense of dynamics?
They had to be so clever. They'd use these short staccato notes to create space, or they'd write the bass line to weave in and out of the melody so they didn't just clash.
Yeah.
That limitation forced them to be better composers.
That is the definition of creativity through constraint. Okay, then we've got channel 4, the noise channel.
Percussion made of bits. That's how the article describes it. And it's perfect. This channel just generates random static, white noise. But the chip lets you control the frequency and the length of that static burst.
So a short, high-pitched burst of static would sound like a hi-hat.
Exactly. And a longer, lower-pitched burst becomes a snare drum, or an explosion, or the sound of wind. It's the whole drum kit, but it's all just shaped noise.
And that leaves the 5th channel, the mysterious DPCM.
The delta modulation channel. This is the wild card. It could play back actual recorded audio samples, but at a very, very low quality, kind of 1 bit.
1 bit? We listen to 24-bit audio now. That must have sounded incredibly crunchy.
Crunchy is putting it mildly. It's like a bad walkie-talkie. It was mostly used for those rough voice clips, like an announcer yelling, "Fight!" Or sometimes for more realistic drums, like in Super Mario Bros. 3. But it took up a ton of memory, so it wasn't used all that often.
So that's it. That's the NES orchestra. 2 singing pulse waves, 1 loud triangle bass, noise drums, and maybe a crunchy sample. The entire sound of the 80s.
That's the palette. But then, of course, technology moved on. We left the living room and went portable. Enter the Game Boy.
The gray brick. The handheld that changed the world.
And the Game Boy used a different chip, the Sharp LR35902. And this is where it gets a little surprising. You'd think a newer console would have more sound channels, right?
Yeah, of course. Better tech, more sounds.
But the Game Boy actually dropped down to 4 channels. It lost that DPCM sample channel.
Fewer tools. But the article argues the Game Boy gave you more creative freedom than the NES. How does that work?
It is all about the 3rd channel. Remember, on the NES, channel 3 was that stubborn, uncontrollable triangle wave.
The loud bass player. Yeah.
Right. Well, on the Game Boy, that was replaced by the wave channel. And this is the absolute game changer. This feature let the composer literally draw their own custom waveform.
When you say draw, you mean they could design the actual shape of the sound from scratch?
I mean, literally. You had a tiny bank of memory, just 32 samples long, where you could define exactly what you wanted the wave to look like. You weren't stuck with a square or a triangle. You could make a sawtooth wave, a weird metallic clang, a super gritty bass sound that just doesn't exist in nature.
So it was basically a programmable synthesizer in your pocket.
Exactly. It was a center of creativity for every Game Boy musician. That's why Game Boy music often sounds heavier and darker than NES music. It just has this distinct, grittier personality.
And a certain texture, too. The article mentions D-dash noise.
Yes, the hardware wasn't perfect. There's this subtle hiss, a background buzz from the digital to analog converter. Back in the day, audiophiles hated that stuff, but now chiptune fans love it.
Oh.
It adds grit. It's like the crackle on a vinyl record. It proves you're hearing real hardware.
Okay, so we have the hardware, we know the tools, but how do people actually make this music? I'm guessing it's not by dragging notes onto a staff like Beethoven.
Definitely not, no.
Okay.
If you want to make authentic chiptune, you have to enter the world of trackers.
Trackers. I've seen screenshots of these things. They don't look like music software. They look like a spreadsheet or like you're hacking the mainframe in the Matrix or something.
It's so intimidating at first. A tracker is a vertical sequencer. So, in modern software, music scrolls from left to right. In a tracker, it scrolls from top to bottom. And there are no piano keys, no musical notes on a line.
No notes. Then what are you even looking at?
Hexadecimal codes.
You are literally typing in code to make a song.
You are. You input the note, the volume, the instrument, the effects. Everything is done with numbers and letters. A C major chord isn't a visual stack of notes. It's a specific set of alphanumeric characters, like C340 Azudu.
That sounds incredibly tedious. Why would anyone want to do that?
Precision. Absolute surgical control. Because you are inputting data for every single tick of the console's clock, you can tell the chip exactly what to do on every single frame. You can make the pitch slide, wobble, and they cut out, all in a millisecond.
So it's the difference between driving an automatic car and manually controlling the fuel injection while you're driving.
That is a fantastic way to put it. And this whole culture grew up around it. The article points to the big three tools.
Right. First up is LSDJ, Little Sound DJ.
The king of Game Boy music. This is an actual cartridge you pop in, a real Game Boy. It's famous for its interface and for how it lets you manipulate that wave channel to create these incredible growling bass sounds.
And people perform with this, right? This isn't just for the studio.
No, absolutely. There's a huge global scene. You'll be at a club, it's loud, people are dancing, and the DJ on stage isn't behind a laptop. They are holding up a Game Boy.
Thumbs just flying over the A and B buttons.
And they are live editing the hexadecimal code in real time to turn the track and drop the beat. They're treating a toy from 1989 as a serious performance instrument.
That is so cool. It's so punk rock. Okay, what are the others?
There's Nanoloop, which is known for a more minimalist, techno-focused aesthetic. And then for the NES purists, there's FamiTracker.
But FamiTracker runs on a PC, right?
It does, but it enforces the rules. If you try to play a sixth note, FamiTracker will literally stop you and say, nope, the NES only has 5 channels. It's a simulation of the limitation.
That is some serious dedication. But let's fast forward to right now. The article is titled The Future of Chiptune. We're not all stuck on old hardware anymore. How is this sound evolving?
And this is where it gets really interesting. Chiptune has escaped the hardware. It's moved into the modern DW, Ableton Logic, all that.
And we're seeing this thing called expanded chiptune.
Right. Expanded chiptune is what happens when you take those pure, raw 8-bit sounds and you start applying modern effects that were just impossible back in the 80s.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so imagine taking that sharp rectangular lead melody from the NES, that pulse wave, but then just drenching it in a massive cinematic reverb. Or taking a square wave bass and sidechaining it to a kick drum so it pumps like a modern EDM track.
Or using the noise channel to make trap snares.
Exactly. Think about modern trap. Those super fast, ticking, rattling hi-hats. That is pure noise channel DNA. The source argues these textures are now standard in lo-fi hip-hop, hyperpop, all over online video. It's not game music anymore. It's just a texture, a sonic color that works.
And there are plugins now that make this way easier, I assume. You don't have to learn hexadecimal if you don't want to.
No, thankfully. There are plugins like Plogue ChipSynth, which are just incredible. They don't just play back a recording of an NES. They reproduce the sound chip at the circuit level.
Yeah.
They're emulating the electricity running through the actual silicon.
That is wild. It's like a digital twin of the chip.
It is. And then there's YMCK's magical 8-bit plug, another really popular one. These tools make the 8-bit sound accessible to anyone with a laptop.
It really does feel like we've hit this point of cultural crossover. This isn't just for nerds in a basement anymore.
Far from it. The 8-bit aesthetic has become a shorthand for digital culture. But more than that, it's respected for its own merit. The article, it defines chiptune as the future musical language.
The future musical language. Which brings us all the way back to the start. Why the future? It seems so counterintuitive to say that 40-year-old tech is the future of music.
It's the future because the fundamentals are timeless. Rectangular waves and noise snares, they're like the atoms of electronic sound. But I think, more importantly, the philosophy is the future.
The philosophy of limitation.
Well, think about where we're headed. We're entering an era of AI music, of infinite generation. You can press a button and get a symphony. And when everything is easy, creativity can really suffer. The blank page problem becomes the infinite page problem.
It's just too much. It's overwhelming.
But the Game Boy is this tiny box. It just says, here are 4 channels, here are your waves. That's all you get. Now go make something beautiful. That friction, that resistance, that's what forces you to be human. It forces you to make a choice.
It's like writing a haiku instead of a novel. The strict structure makes every single syllable matter that much more.
Perfectly said. And I think that's why this music is never going to die. As long as people want to understand the raw building blocks of melody and synthesis, they will return to 8-bit.
It really makes you think about your own creativity. The source poses this idea, and I kind of want to leave you, the listener, with it. In a world with infinite creative options where AI can write a song for you, what could you create if you limited yourself to just 4 channels?
Sometimes Closing the door on options is the only way to open the door to real innovation.
A huge thank you to MMR for the column that sparked this entire deep dive. And thank you all for listening. Go listen to some chiptune today, but really listen to it. Don't just hear the nostalgia. Listen for the engineering.
See you in the next dive.
Bye for now.